Hello, my name is Preston Waters, and this is my final presentation for the Adult Education and Training Program at Colorado State University. Before the Adult Education and Training Program at Colorado State University, I was given the opportunity to work in many different environments. First being Consolidated Electrical Distributors, where I worked for my father as a special type of electrical engineer designing switchgear equipment. Did that for 20 years. During that time, I had the chance to open up a small chain of health food stores called Rancho Farms Naturally. Got to experience a retail environment promoting good health. Kind of a contradiction to what I was doing in electrical engineering, where the people tend to not take care of themselves, drink quite a bit, and dealing with the high stress loads and the micromanagement. Following both those careers, I decided to work at Don Hagee Electric as an electrical contractor. Wanted to see how the other side worked in the trade side of the business that contraposed my father's company. Interesting working with union and non-union environments and see how different teams work. After my electrical experience, I decided to go into the retail world and decided to work at Home Depot, where I was dealing with customers that would come in and different types of emotionalities, help them with their home design or repair problems, and at the same time really getting to identify with the variety of people that worked in a retail environment. After a few years of the Home Depot, I decided to try my hand at beverages and more, which became Bevmo. My father had always trained me how to drink and make wine and beer and spirits, and I thought I'd put some of that experience and knowledge from him to good use and educate others. I found that it was a very fun environment, that, despite a lot of the negativity that surrounds drinking, working in the retail environment is quite motivational and very fun. Then I decided to work as a manager at Dick's Sporting Goods, where I am currently, kind of culminating my experience, whether it was a professional athlete, working in a health food store, retail, and then dealing with a variety of clientele that come in to buy sporting goods. It's been experience. It's interesting identifying with the people that work in that type of environment with the various backgrounds, so whether it's sports or professional industries. Big learning curve. Along with my work experience, I had a lot of formal and informal education, attending several universities, um, some correspondence, some formal education, everything from naturopathic medicine to psychology, and much of that focused on the human body or the human mind. Even in the adult education program, a lot of my formal and informal experience has presented so much knowledge that not only until now have I really kind of given an understanding how to coalesce it and facilitate my graduating from the adult education training program at Colorado State. So when I ask myself why a master's in adult education, it's that internal motivation, I think, to teach people, no matter what the environment is, whether I'm at work, at home, even online. I'm always feel like I have to try to show or educate other people on the choices they're making or the information they're pursuing, or even in just my stuff I want to divulge about what I'm interested in, what I'm studying. Currently, and for the last actually 10 or 15 years, um, I've had this formal slash informal psychological pursuit to study the limbic system and how emotional loads facilitate learning. Under different stress elements and different exposures. How can someone control the way they learn? How can they make a conscious effort to enhance one's learning? And a lot of that was focused on the limbic system. I've been so curious as to secretory chemicals that can facilitate extending what we call refractory periods, or the period in which a neurological synapse can facilitate information uptake. The stimulus for visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. How does someone take that type of environmental load to translate into an emotional response that becomes usable to create an uptake or facilitate an acquiring of knowledge or information as efficient or as quickly as possible. And a lot of my curiosities, not only through adult education, um, but being able to culminate this emotional element to facilitate one's own personal endeavors. Learning how to design environments for adults to learn requires a lot of structure and a lot of identification to know how to create maybe an environment that operates under a level of social justice, that schemas are properly created, and that scaffolding can operate where people not only are required dependent upon the teacher, but they're dependent upon each other. The cohort becomes the facilitator for the education, and the teacher or professor becomes kind of the facilitator. Um, this is where adult education is important, because it's not just like a top-down learning process, and acquiring this kind of information, this knowledge, and this education um, kind of goes right into my psychological identity, and as far as let's say therapy is considered, a counselor. It's not so much about telling what a person needs to do. It's kind of helping them find out what they really need and how did they get there, not necessarily dictating how they get there. And so a lot of that goes into identifying and or modifying the context, for learning or memory and recall, for that individual. And then on top of that, for the classroom. And so, becoming an adult educator, it is a sophisticated process, and the rubrics involved need to be very delineated, because adults have, I think, a higher expectation than students for structure, and the need for really giving them not only the tasks to develop, but creating the environment that facilitates that. And a lot of that becomes the interplay amongst other students. And knowing and being able to identify that you have so many different people within that environment that can facilitate, that particular scaffolding, or, learning from others that enhances or transcends that particular classroom or that particular study or project that's going on. Having acquired the foundational elements to teaching or educating an adult, my future career goals require this experience to facilitate my understanding of emotional and psychological dynamics within work environments. Trying to not only just identify the socialities, but to find motivators and enhancing not only the personal work dynamic, but the overall company as a whole. And coming into my work history as it plays with particular environments, whether it's in industrial or if it's a retail. My background plus my education, I believe, gives me a great foundation for utilizing organizational psychology to develop curriculums or programs that teach management or teach associate or regular employees an identity and an emotionality to focus on success, not only personally but for the company. And out of that, I believe that my relationship with my wife and my kids, as they grow older, and I'm able to identify with them and use the skills that I have, that maybe will help program them, not necessarily to pursue the same educational goals that I have, but they'll be able to identify the elements in their work environments and the emotional requirements and the motivators to not only help themselves, but help others in that environment. So now that I'm coming to the end of my program, what have I learned? What information have I gained that I can take and translate not only to my personal life, my work environment, but then to my future career goals, whether it's education or work advancement? The learning styles, I don't want to be grossly simplistic about auditory, visual, or kinesthetic elements, and don't necessarily want to go, focused on Gardner's multiple intelligences, and there's so many more elements to this, and the contextual delineations that dictate how a person acquires information. But having this information structured for me and in my mind has organized it to where not only is it a level of identification, but It's being able to take that information and structure it, coalesce it, or create a curriculum or a work environment that identifies what that person's particular needs are, their particular styles, or their particular emotional requirements. The emotional context that develop out of that are so subjective, and a lot of my psychological background is going to facilitate trying to really zero in on a person's particular motivations or their needs, and being able to structure a learning environment around that is critical. And so a lot of the information that I've gained in this educational program has helped me to identify and develop an individual, and then within that, hopefully, that personal context, the environment itself, if, like I said, it's a classroom environment, that I'm able to do not only at a singular or individual level, but I'm able to be able to do that through the entire classroom, and identify others as a whole, or as what we call social identity. Um, the motivations that come into that are dependent upon my ability to develop learning materials, an emotional attachment, or emotional resonance, or some sort of internal or external motivator that facilitates the uptake of my information, and not only the uptake of it, but for that person's practical usage. In other words, what I've taught them translates into their life. In other words, the way they can use it, what they can do in their work and personal lives. And the adult education and training program, through everything from the Mayor Salave and Caruso's, the MSCIT tests to identify emotional intelligence, through rubric design, and through so many different exposures of curriculum and skill sets that educators need. I believe that I've developed a good foundation, a good baseline to work with people, and hopefully that will constantly evolve. It'll constantly grow. And I can't say that I know everything. Obviously, I don't. But I have a great starting point. So from this program, I feel that I can flower, I can blossom into a more holistic or comprehensive educator, beyond just the psychological elements, and I'm able to work in different environments. So when I go out, when I'm working on my PhD and I'm hoping to teach online, or teach in a classroom, I can also go out into a particular work environment, whether it's manufacturing or retail, and be able to cross or translate that kind of ability into different environments, and still identify the context. So the skill sets that I've developed out of this are so important for my personal development. But as far as my career, I can just see the growth potentials that are going to come from that. For the last 3 years, probably the most critical piece for my repertoire of learning how to teach adults is probably focused on emotional intelligence. Prior to this program, I spent a lot of personal time and research on amygdala and hippocampal interactions with emotional and stimulus loads that facilitate uptake of information, and then indexing heuristics that not only create information within the lobes of the brain, but also facilitates the regurgitation, the recall. And when you address the emotional elements that exist in the limbic system, that transcends out of the body and into an intelligence that goes beyond just the cerebral elements. And so you have Mayor Salavin Caruso, Daniel Goleman, and Dr. Barone, who have spent many years researching perception emotions and how to use them and understand them through identifying one's own emotional intelligences. In other words, what their capacities, and so creating these measurements for it that operate out of personal awareness and relationships and capacities. And this has been so important for when towards the end of the program we were designing rubrics for identifying a context for learning, and making sure that the educator, the facilitator for that environment, is able to adapt and create a program or curriculum that works within that that facilitates a resonance. In other words, emits an emotional, we could call it understanding, we can call it a body language, we could call it, it could be a variety of different models that can fall under what we consider resonance. But, in a way, it could be just a personality or an attitude. But exuding that emotional awareness can facilitate, a productive environment for learning, within that cohort, within that sociality. And a lot of that is so critical and dependent upon an educator not only identifying on themselves and then being programmed or educated on how to identify others, but then being able to design a curriculum that not only stimulates the learning environment, but being able to adjust it, or adapt it, molding it and involving it, because every classroom is going to be different. Every day you have a class, the people that come in there, because they're emotionally driven, you can have that emotional load change, and so you need to be able to make sure that what your idea is, or what your curriculum is, or what your program is able to adapt, modify or modulate itself into always facilitating ability to learn, and making sure that the communication, the interplay, resonates with everybody, so everybody becomes a collective whole. It doesn't become just people that exist and just throw in their bits and pieces. You have a holism and a holistic approach with the teacher, educator, whatever, being a facilitator and making sure that everyone gets identified within that environment. The technology that I got to utilize during this program was astounding. Initially got to tinker with WebCT and Blackboard and designing the layouts and even kind of creating a course within it, let alone the experimentation with wikis and Second Life and a lot of the web and cloud tools that we have access to facilitate learning environments. And there's so many of them. Right now I'm using ED Web for a lot of my things, and in Vivo I'm getting a familiarity with. So there's so many tools for virtual learning. It's just kind of awesome. And then you have a lot of the comfort zones of PowerPoint designs and making sure that you have a good presentation that's easy to follow, that people can have access to and utilize, and the tools that Microsoft has facilitated, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. They're great tools to be comfortable with and utilize in a comprehensive presentation. YouTube and other video media for me have always been kind of an awkward, not one of the most comfortable persons that want to be on camera. It's one thing to be in person. I have no problem being in front of people and talking and presenting material. It just seems in that kind of environment a little awkward. But as I've tinkered with it, I can see where the benefit is. Again, kind of like the PowerPoint or Microsoft products. It's an additional tool that I have control over to enhance a learning environment. And then beyond that is being able to design things that are visually stimulating, through Acrobat and Corel and web design. Having not only just the background and all the other technological tools, but being able to make it look like it's enticing, that people want to look at it, that I don't want to say make it pretty, but that it's not just dry and just words on a screen. Becoming aware of my digital style with online education has been difficult. I've had a struggle with having identification of others reading my material, reading the information I put out there. My expectation, though not so conscious of it, was always the assessment that others are reading and thinking and operating the way I do. And doing that kind of thought process, as well as presenting information in a typed format, the criticisms that have come back to me, though difficult to take at times, has been crucial for me to open up, kind of let go, and making sure that when I do put my information together, others won't struggle, or not even just struggle, just won't even read my material because of whether it being too difficult to read or it's just not fun or not interesting. So I have had a good evolving, an evolution out of this for the last 3 years, identifying my strengths and weaknesses in presenting my information. And as I go on, I'd like to think I get better and making sure and being aware of others out there reading my information, understand what I'm trying to present to them. After I graduate the Adult Education and Training program, I plan to apply for two different programs, the Industrial Psychology PhD program or Educational Psychology PhD. Um, Prior to that time, or during, I plan on completing bachelor degrees in anthropology and exercise physiology. Hopefully, after I complete this program and during my PhD experience, I would love to try to get a job part-time teaching at a community college or even a high school. That way I can maintain a regular career at Dick's Sporting Goods and teach in the evenings or off hours at a community college and high school if it works out. But one of the more critical elements to my ongoing future is making sure that I persist in my research of emotional learning, identifying with the different emotional elements that come into play that facilitate someone's uptake of information, social interactions, let alone personal performance, has always been crucial for my personal development, let alone career and education. One of the biggest things that has come from this program for me, which there was an expectation of it going into the program, but now that I'm coming out of it, being able to identify a need, a class or program that can be taught in a formal educational environment or informal or within a business, specifically with the retail industry. I call it retail psychology, but this type of course, which I haven't seen in anybody's curriculum in my searches, really helps to identify the special elements within the retail market, the retail business, the retail mentality. And part of that comes with, we have technology that is coming into play versus, humanity that is kind of being sacrificed for the sake of profit. And so you wind up having this ethicality that tends to be stepped on because the expectation is for people to perform at a level of technological delineation. So what I'm trying to state is that technology creates so many different elements, such as what we call metrics. These are all these different classifications, categorizations, and statistics that create an expectation of performance. 15, 20 years ago, it was just simple that we buy a product at a profit and sell it, and hope that the customers enjoy it and come back. Now it's all these different controlling variables that dictate the performance of that to maximize profit and the repeat of the customer. And so technology has driven this with the way we call it point of sale machines and requirements for surveys and then let alone the metrics that are involved as far as whether it's inventory ordering or management or the product management and merchandising, and then you have beyond that all the expectational protective elements for theft or shrink. So technology has kind of brought in this low margin for error for human work environments, and so it's difficult for people to understand because upper management is being programmed under these technological expectations, and a lot of that has created a lack of emotional identity and resonance that a lot of the people at the bottom are having a hard time, really figuring out what their motivation is, since everything is becoming so micromanaged.